Okay, well, let's open tonight with a word of prayer, if you would join with me. Lord, we give you thanks for this day. We give you thanks for rain. We give you thanks for all the ways in which you nourish us, both physically and spiritually. We give you thanks. And we thank you for opportunities to serve, and we pray that you'll be with us tonight as we learn about more opportunities to serve, more opportunities to be your hands and feet, more opportunities to love those that are our neighbors. We just pray that you'll be with us and bless all that we do. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Amen. All righty. Well, I want to tell you just a little bit about our training, what we're going to do tonight, so you know a little bit about what to expect and what we're going to cover. There's two basic purposes to the training that we cover. One is to help you deal a little bit with what your expectations may be. You may be a little nervous, you may have a little anxiety about what's it going to be like to volunteer with homeless people. Has anybody ever volunteered with a homeless person before? Anybody? Okay, we have a few. What was the setting? Was it a downtown shelter or an overnight emergency shelter? Yeah, was it for men? Like for men? For men. Okay, yeah. Sleep in one big room? Sleep in one big room on mats probably, something like that? Okay. So our situation is a little bit different because we're bringing families into your actual church, and so it's a little bit different. So I want to be able to just share with you a little bit about what to expect. So when you come, it'll deal a little bit with your anxiety that you might have. The other part is a lot of our time is spent talking about sensitivity and what is the best way to care and offer hospitality for the families that we're going to be serving. What you're doing is opening up your congregation and offering hospitality for up to 4 homeless families for a week. And that's what you're doing. You're offering hospitality, giving them a place where they can get back on their feet, work on the things they need to do on their plan, on their case plan, their self-sufficiency plan to get back up on their own and to have independence again. And so we want to talk about what are the ways that you can offer the best possible hospitality that there is. How can we be sensitive to what their needs are and offer the best hospitality? So those are the two main purposes. We're going to talk about what to expect and how to offer the best hospitality to our families. So the first thing we want to do is, just like any good organization, there's paperwork, right? So we need you to fill out some paperwork. Make sure everybody gets one of those. If you need a pen, let me know. I have pens if you need one. If you'll take the information there, we're missing one, right? Okay. I think you filled that out here. In the front of the book, there is some information. Hello. If you'll start by filling out the first 3 forms there. The first one is just a basic volunteer information sheet so we can get some information from you. So we'll have your information for our newsletter and other reasons. There's also some opportunities for you to volunteer for something extra at the bottom. If you'd like to be an office angel and you have time during the day to do some office work and be a receptionist at our day center, that's there. We're also looking for truck drivers. If you would be willing to drive our 14-foot box truck on Sundays to move the family's things back and forth between churches, there's an opportunity for you to check that, and then we'll contact you. The second page is our confidentiality sheet. We need everybody to fill that out and state that you'll keep any information that you learn about our families confidential. The last sheet there is a driving application. If you're willing to drive our truck or our van, then there's a place for you to fill that out.
Do they need special driver's license?
To drive our 15-passenger van, you do not need a special driver's license. It's a normal one. Just realize that it's a 15-passenger, so it's a little bigger than most vehicles. Same with our truck, it's a little bigger, but you don't need a special license. We do ask if you drive our van that you have a clean driving record for a year and be at least 21 years of age or older. So, and while you're hosting on the weekend, you will need somebody from your church to be able to drive the van, to drive the families back and forth where they need to go on Saturday and then on to the day center on Sunday. So as many as we can get, so that Glenn will have a list of folks to call on. That'll be great. Yes, what I'll do is I'll leave with you extra manuals because everybody needs to get a manual. Everybody needs to have all the forms. Okay. And when they watch it, they'll just need to fill out the first 3 forms and turn those back in. If you're not going to do the driver one, you don't have to turn it in. You can turn it in and I'll recycle it, but you don't have to fill it out if you're not going to drive either of the vehicles.
I don't know, is that okay to, do I have to fill out something else for my husband?
Yes, or if you,
You might help with the name
yeah, I would take another one for him and just fill out the first sheet, and then he really needs to fill out. Why don't you just take it for him and then let him fill it out and bring it back and give it to Columbia? That'll be good. Sure.
Okay, yeah. So as soon as we get the tape back and then can get it on.
Does anybody need extra ones for somebody that's at home, a spouse or a child or?
My child is 10, does she need a?
Nah,
15?
no. Under 16 doesn't need it. Great. 16 and older. Do you need another?
Under 16 and over needs that?
Yeah.
Under 16, they don't need an extra
Somebody else need one?
I'm gonna take one.
Okay.
Actually, it's on mine.
And I've got plenty. I've got over 50 here, but I'm gonna leave some with Kalinda too, so she'll have those for people that need to do the training later. Okay. When I ring the bell, I need you to do something for me. I need you to collect up all your stuff and move to a new table or a new area to sit, and then go back to working on your assignment. I promise there's a purpose. And when you sit at your new table, make sure you introduce yourself to everybody. Try to sit by somebody you don't know. I know we're a small group, but try to do that. And then go back to working on filling out the forms. Tom, just last time, promise. You look too comfortable.
We're the Kims. I'll come sit next to the Kims. I don't know them. Oh, I'm gonna go to a different table.
Which day did you go on today?
Well, there's no seats. Forget it. I'm coming back.
Pat went Friday
It's
night.
the easier
It was
chair.
very quiet. I didn't get a call until late. So the person was like, "Where are they?" Okay, if you're still working on forms, that's okay. Just John will grab those in a minute. Okay, let's move along. I'm going to let you know a little bit about. Everybody should introduce themselves. Okay. A little bit about what I call the bell exercise. The reason why I ring the bell. There is a purpose for it. What I wanted you to do was sympathize a little bit with what it's like to be one of our families. Because what they do is they come to a church and they get very comfortable as you can get in a week. They get settled in, they bring their stuff. You put them in a Sunday school classroom and they make it their home for the week. They get to know new people. And right as they're getting ready to feel pretty comfortable, we pack them all up and we move them to another church and start the whole process over. So it was annoying to you to do paperwork while being asked to move and reintroduce yourself. Think what it would be like while you're trying to put your life back together, trying to find housing for your children, transportation, employment, childcare, all those things, how that can be a hindrance. But that leads to a good question. Well, then why do you move families around if it can be a hindrance? Well, there's 3 reasons for that. One is because our families are in transition already. This is not something new to them. They're used to moving around. They're in this hotel this week, that one next week, or they're with this family member or that family member, or sometimes they even sleep in their cars in our community. So they're already in transition anyway, so it's not something new. Another reason is because it's a built-in motivator. If you do this long enough, 7, 8, 9, 10 weeks, you don't want to do it anymore. You want to have your own place. You want to have your own independence. You want to be self-sufficient. You don't want to have to do this anymore. But probably for me and for our board, probably the most important reason why we do this and why we would continue to do it even if somebody gave us space for a shelter is because every time a family comes to your church and stays for a week, they come in contact with between 30 and 50 people of faith. Over the course of 10 weeks, that's between 350 and 500 people of faith. And we believe that when that happens, change happens in a person's life. Hopefully religious change, hopefully they're coming to know God, but also just in being in your presence and learning from you, something happens that you can't manufacture. Families begin to have hope for the future, and that's something that we believe in. It's something that we're excited about that happens. It's something that you can't just make happen. But when people come in contact with people like yourselves, that's when hope happens. And it's exciting because families come in and they say things like, nobody cares about me, nobody would care if I died tomorrow, I can't do it, I don't have the resources, all of these things like that. And then when they're leaving, they're saying things like, well, there are people that care about me. I didn't know there were people like this in the community. I didn't know people cared this much. I didn't, now I've got all these friends, I've got all these people I can rely on. I can do it. I'm making a difference. I'm doing things I've never done before. We hear things like that, and you'll hear things like that. And so it's exciting when we can bring people together to make that difference. So that's why we continue to move people around. If we had a stationary site, our volunteer pool would shrink to about the size of this room overnight. Because another exciting thing about what we do is this is your ministry. When they're at your church, I don't come and volunteer. I volunteer when my church does it. I don't have staff that come here and run the program. You run the program. So we recruit and train you and support you, and when the families are here, it's your ministry and you do the ministry. And so because it's your ministry and it's at your location, there's a lot of ownership in that, and you want to do your best because you're the ones offering the hospitality at your congregation. And so that's what makes it such an awesome win-win organization program. What I want to do now is just give a brief overview of the program, how it works, give you a chance to ask some questions. Then we're going to spend most of the rest of our time on the sensitivity video and talking about how we can best offer hospitality. Family Promise is a 501c3. We're a nonprofit organization here in Gwinnett County. We've been up and running almost 6 years. And our goal really is to help end homelessness here in Gwinnett one family at a time, and really to help families achieve independence and to have lasting independence. Normally I get a lot of questions like, why do we need a program like this in Gwinnett? Are you sure there are homeless people here? We don't see the homeless people. Where are they? They're not under the bridge. And that's because here in Gwinnett, primarily most of the homeless people are families with children. Across the country, 40% of the homeless population are families with children, and it's the fastest growing sector of the homeless population. Here in Gwinnett, we believe it to be much higher than that, probably over 60%, maybe even more, are families with children. And so there is a big need here in Gwinnett. And there's some information in your packet that we're going to talk about some more in a little while. But if you want to flip to like the next to the last page of the sheets that are in your packet there, is just some of the statistics nationwide, but also for Gwinnett. I think it's the last sheet there. Some of the ones just to highlight, almost 1 million people are homeless on any given night in the United States. That's 1.35 million children over the course of a year. The average age of a homeless person is 9. And if you take the time to really wrap your mind around that and think about it, we're talking about a lot of children. If everybody that's homeless, from the youngest to the oldest, is taken into account, and the average age is 9, there are a lot of children that are homeless. Here in Gwinnett, it's estimated that between 6,000 and 7,000 children are homeless each year right here in our community. And we at Family Promise believe that that's way too many. We believe if there's one child that's homeless in our community, it's one too many, because we really don't think any child should have to suffer the uncertainty and stress of being homeless. And so that's why we bring people of faith together to do something about it. You also see there the evictions in 2009 that were 24,000, actually down a little bit, but foreclosures made up for it, being up 77% just in 09 from 08 at almost 24,000. When I started doing this almost 5.5 years ago, foreclosures were 6,000 that year in 2005. So they've gone all the way up to 24,000 just over the course of 5 years. So that gives you a little bit example of the need. And the last one there is important too. It's of all the families that we serve, 50% are children, and of that, well, 60% are children, and of that 60%, 50% are under the age of 5. So again, we're talking about a lot of young children right here in our community. Some of the questions I get are, what are the homeless people like, the people that we serve, the families? Well, they're people just like you and me. They're mothers and brothers and sisters and fathers and people of God, people of worth that just find themselves in some sort of a financial situation that has put them in need, that has put them in this position where they don't have housing. They're homeless for a lot of different reasons. Perhaps a house fire takes the resources, or an accident or an illness takes the resources, or maybe it's a parent leaves and leaves a single parent to raise 2, 3, 4, 5 children sometimes. Maybe it's a loss of a job or downsizing. Sometimes it's just poverty. We do have families that live below the poverty level here in Gwinnett, and it's very hard to find affordable housing and affordable child care. And so it's real easy for a family with low income, with just a little hiccup or a little something happen, to put them in a situation where they can become homeless. It's estimated that in Gwinnett County, a family needing a 3-bedroom apartment would need to make about $38,000 a year. If it's a single parent making minimum wage or close to minimum wage, they'd have to work over 150 hours a week just to be able to afford that apartment. So that just shows you a little bit about the discrepancy between what needs to be made and the income that's actually made to be able to live here in our community. What's unique about what we do is we take existing resources and bring them together with families in need. When we decided we wanted to do something about homelessness, we didn't have to go out and raise $3 million to build a shelter, because in Gwinnett County every night there are hundreds of churches just like this one that sit empty. When we leave tonight, we're going to cut the lights off, cut the heat off, and go out the door, and all these rooms sit empty. So what's so great about our model, Family Promise, which has been around for 25 years, is that it takes these existing resources, churches that are empty at night but during the day are full of compassionate people that want to make a difference, and we bring those two things together and put families right into congregations where congregations can care on them and help and support them. We have 29 congregations that partner together, 24 now that are hosting families in their space, and we have 5 that are supporting with volunteers and funds as well. So because we're able to provide that kind of support, our families are very successful. We have one full-time case manager that works with just 4 families at a time, and because we have all these churches and all these people wanting to make a difference, we have about an 85% success rate. When families leave our program, they leave with full-time employment and some sort of housing. And what's exciting about the number of churches that we have is all the resources that are there that are kind of built into our model. Between 29 congregations, can anybody guess how many people are represented, how many churchgoers? Some call them members, some call them attenders, but how many church members or attenders are represented? Just a guess.
59.
You're right, 49. It's 49 and a half. Good guess. So almost 50,000 people are represented between those 29 congregations. And so in that 50,000, there are a lot of resources there. We have a very large volunteer pool. We have a pool of possible funders to help us with the financial support. We also have services that are represented. If we need a mechanic somewhere in 50,000 people, there's a mechanic. If we need a doctor somewhere in 50,000 people, there's a doctor. If whatever we need, it's represented there. And so we're looked at by the other organizations in kind of an envious way, because they look at us and go, oh, I can't get volunteers. I'm sitting beside them meetings, and they say, well, don't you feel the stress of not having volunteers? I said, no, I don't feel the stress of not having volunteers. We have more volunteers than sometimes that we know what to do with. And they said, well, I can't get anybody to adopt my families and provide gifts at Christmas. I said, I have churches fighting over our families at Christmas and bringing book bags back to school. And so it's a great thing, because the model is set up to where we all come together. Because of all these resources, we're able to help these families be very successful. And the good thing, too, is not one church has to shoulder responsibility of housing families 365 days a year. Because we take turns and do it 3 to 4 times a year, everybody gets to help, and it's not too much for any one church, and any church of any size can be involved. So it's really, really an exciting model and a great way to respond to this need. I just want to mention real quick the 5 components of our program, the 5 main components. First is congregations, like I said. The congregations are the shelter. Without the congregation, we don't have a shelter. If I didn't have 24 congregations that were hosting, then tonight we wouldn't have families at a church. We wouldn't have families spending the night at Pleasant Hill Presbyterian Church tonight, because we wouldn't have a shelter. So it takes all these churches working together to provide the shelter. The shelter piece is very important. The second part is volunteers. Without volunteers, it doesn't work, because as I said before, we only have a very small staff, 2 full-time and 2 to 3 part-time van drivers and financial assistants and things like that. All of the work, most of the work is done by you, the volunteer, and it's everything from driving a van, making a meal, spending the night, washing clothes, sending thank you notes, all of those things. wrapping gifts at Christmas time. There's something for everybody, and there's something for all ages. In 2009, we had right at 1,200 volunteers put in almost 19,000 hours of service. Since the beginning, Family Promise, we put in well over 100,000 hours of service with all of our volunteers, and had over 5,500 volunteers that have volunteered in some capacity over the last 5 years. One good thing about volunteering is that any age can do this, and we encourage children to come and volunteer. If you have small children or know somebody that has small children, a lot of times small children can't go on a mission trip. They can't go to Mexico, or it's not even safe for them to go to downtown Atlanta and volunteer with homeless shelters like some of you have been to. They're just not safe. What's good about this is in your church, and so you can bring them to a safe environment where you know they're safe, and there are always children in our program, because there has to be a child, at least one child and one parent, to qualify for our program. So there's always children in the program. There's always somebody that the children can relate to and interact with and play with. And so early on, people were not signing in their children when we first started doing this. So like, you need to be signing in your kids so we can capture their hours. We'll talk about that in a minute. And they said, well, they're not volunteering. He's just 2 years old, and he's over there just playing with the other child. I'm like, well, that's volunteering. That's service. And if that's not, then what is it? And so we want to count those children as they're coming with you to volunteer. And kids can really have an active part in volunteering with the other children and making them feel at home and offering that hospitality. The third component is the day center. If the families are here at night, where do they go during the day? They go to our day center. Our day center is on Sugarloaf Parkway at First Christian Church, where it's housed. They give us the house behind the church, where we have a 5-year lease for $1 a year, and we're paid in full, so that's good. It's a wonderful house that we've renovated. It's 2,400 square feet of conditioned space, where it has everything that we need: offices for our case manager and the director, but also spaces for the families to do their laundry, 3 full baths, a kitchen, a place for the children to play, a dedicated computer room where each family has their own computer where they can focus on looking for housing and employment. And so it's just been a real blessing to have that. So centrally located right in the county seat of Gwinnett, in such a great location. We're just really blessed for that as well. The fourth component is transportation. In Gwinnett, you've got to have transportation to get where you need to go, and our public transportation doesn't go everywhere you need to go. And so we have a van and 2 van drivers that will pick the families up at the church in the morning, bring them to the day center or school or work or wherever they need to go, and back to the church in the evening by dinner time. And so not only do we provide transportation while they're in the program, but if they don't have their own transportation, then we're trying to help them locate donated transportation, so when they do leave the program, they have their own transportation to help them be independent. The last component is fundraising. My board president says that should be number 1. We can't do anything without money, but I put it last. So we wouldn't need the money if we didn't have the churches to offer the shelter. So we are completely funded by the community, and so all of our funding comes primarily from right here in the community, from individuals, from churches, from civic groups, church groups, as well as local businesses, local corporations. We do receive some grants from local foundations, and then we do several fundraising events each year: a gala and a golf tournament, and now a bed race, and several other things like that. So, but all our funding comes from right here. Our board purposely doesn't like to take federal money, because not only is there a lot of hoops to jump through, but also because they believe that there's enough support right here in our community for what we're doing, and the people believe in what we're doing, and that's been the case. We've always had what we've needed, so that's really been a blessing. Any questions? I know that's really fast and really quick. Any questions about any of that, or how it works?
How many churches, like right now tonight, are hosting?
Just one church.
Just one church per week.
Yeah, and I that's a question that a lot of people ask, because some people think we have like several groups of families at several different churches at the same time, and in theory that sounds good, but it takes so much more to help a family go from homelessness to self-sufficient in 90 days. And so the good thing about being part of a national organization that's been around 25 years is they've worked all the kinks out of this, and they've made all the mistakes that we don't have to. So they try to have, all these families in all these different churches, and it just hasn't worked. Or they try to have 10 families in one church. Well, that's too many. Or they try to have a church host 8 or 10 weeks in a year. That's too many. So they've worked all the bugs out to where 3 to 4 families is ideal, up to 14 total. So you'll never have more than 14 individuals, you'll never have more than 4 families. So if the agreement with your church is that you need 4 rooms for when you host, so that each family has their own room. I'll never come in and say, oh, this week you've got 6. It'll never be more than 4, it'll always be a 3 or 4. It'll never be more than 14. And the 14, there's this real complicated formula that we use to get the 14. We have a 15-passenger van. So that's it. That's the formula. We have a driver, we have room for 14, and if they all don't have transportation, we've got to get them all in there. So that's it. But the part about hosting 3 or 4 times a year, there are some affiliates that open with not enough churches. They open with 7 or 8 churches, and churches are hosting 5 and 6 and 7 times a year. And it just begins to wear on the church. And then if you only host once or twice, it's not often enough to keep your volunteers connected. By the time it comes around, it's almost like you're starting all over and recruiting again all over. And so 3 or 4 times, every quarter, and it seems to work well. People stay connected, and you're ready when your time comes around. Most churches can do 3 or 4 times. They can find the space at least for that amount of time. We're real flexible when it comes to churches. Well, we're flexible when it comes to everything because you have to be, but especially when it comes to churches because we know your situation. I've worked in churches, so I know your situation with your building, and it's busy and it's packed and it's used all the time. And trying to find that space, we're flexible. We have some churches that just host in the summer because they use preschool space and it's only not used in the summer. So they host once in June, once in July, once in August. We have some that do back-to-back weeks because that works better for them. You're welcome to do that. You're welcome to pick and choose and spread your weeks out, whatever works for your church.
Where's your referral source from?
Well, from all over. Today we got a referral from Alabama. So actually it was one of our affiliates. We have 7 affiliates in Georgia, but we have 158 across the country. So there are, I think, 5 or 6 in Alabama. They referred a family to us today that I think we're going to take this week. We don't have a shortage of referrals. We're getting about 100 referrals a month.
But they're coming through.
They're coming through the Gwinnett Helpline, which is run by the Gwinnett Coalition for Health and Human Services, or the United Way Helpline 211, or the school system. The school system has 2 full-time social workers just for homeless children, just for homeless students. At last count, we had 1,600 homeless students in Gwinnett County that the school system knows about. Then we've got the other social workers. We've got all the school counselors that know about us. DFACS workers know about us. Police know about us. I got a call from a policeman the other day who was evicting a family out of their apartment. They had nowhere to go, and he called us. So we have, like I said, we get 100 calls a month. We serve 4 families at a time for up to 90 days. We serve about 18 to 20 families a year. So we're hardly touching, but we're doing what we can. And our goal, hopefully in the next 3 months or so, is to open a second rotation of churches. So we'll have 2 working and be able to serve 4 families at one rotation and 4 families another, so we'll be able to double our capacity. And it's taken several years just to get to that point, but we're excited about being able to double and really be able to help address the need as it's continually growing and increasing.
How long does that take for the family to get out of the system?
Our average right now is 65 to 70 days. We like to see it happen within 90 days. So, but some do it a lot faster. Some are just waiting on housing to come in. They're waiting for special funding or whatever. They just need a small time to do that. Some have a job right when they come in, or they've just found one. They just need some time to save up. Others come in, they have nothing. I mean, don't have a driver's license, don't have a car, don't have a job. Some of the spouse or the father or the mother has just left. The other parent has just left, and they're just left to try to figure out what to do. We've had several very young single mothers, 21, 22, 19, who had never worked before. So when the father of the children leave, it leaves a very young single mother who's never worked before, maybe has never had a car before, maybe never had a license. So we're really starting from scratch with things like a license and driving test and how do you parallel park, things like that. Then getting child care assistance and all those kind of things we have to get before we can even start looking. I mean, you can start looking for work, but you can't start working until you have those things in place, child care and all those other things. So it really depends on the family situation, but anywhere typically from 30 to 60, 75 days. We have seen the last 2 years it taking a little bit longer, especially with certain families, because it's just been really hard to find employment. Really hard. Yes?
When would we know the makeup of the families that we're going to get, typically, a typical time frame?
Typically, if there's not going to be a change before you host, within 2 weeks beforehand.
2
Right now, we have 2 families bringing a new one tomorrow. One of those 2 families will be gone by Christmas. And maybe even the other, we may have complete turnover, but when we know there's gonna be a change, it almost doesn't make sense to give them to you too early, because then it's just changed. Sometimes it changes just a few days before, so sometimes I'll send the list to the coordinator and say, here's what I have right now. I don't know what it's gonna be in a week, but this is what I have right now, just so you feel better about it.
Do you also serve people in illegal situations here?
When you mean illegal, you mean
An immigrant that
Immigrant.
is here is waiting.
they have to be legal, so they've got to have the proper green card, the proper legal documentation for that.
Mhm.
Also, if we do service a couple, which we do service 2-parent families, they have to be married in order to stay and have the same room. Our board made that decision several years ago about, we had a boyfriend-girlfriend situation that were coming in, and so they were not married, and do they have their own room? Well, no, we decided that's they have to be married in order to have their room. So if somebody applied who was not married, then I would have to give them 2 rooms, and so that's rarely going to happen, because I can't afford to give a whole other room up just for a parent to sleep by themselves. So they have to have proof of a marriage license or something to prove that. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Well, if you think of some as we go on, they'll start coming to you a little more as we go along. I want to just go through the information in your manual real quick, and then we'll spend the rest of the time on the video. Doing pretty good on time. We did the first 3 sheets. One of the good things about being part of a national organization is they help us with training materials, and so everybody's getting one of these manuals. It's excellent, an excellent resource for you to read when you get some time. We're going to go over some of this and review some of it, but we're not going to go over all of it page by page, word by word, but it's there for you. And one of the reasons why I give it to you is as a way of reviewing. Some of you may wait a few weeks before you volunteer. Some of you may not volunteer this time, but may volunteer the next time. And so this is a good thing to keep nearby and to take a look at it right before you volunteer. And I'll give you some good tips and some reminders about what we talked about during the training. The first sheet there, after the ones you filled out, was a mission statement, and it just emphasizes again what I already said about our goal is to end homelessness one family at a time, and really to help families be independent. 4 main focus areas, how we do that. Your next sheet there should say services. And that's just there to let you know all the services that we provide for our families and how to refer a family if you were to need to refer a family. It's on the 2nd page there. I tell my families when they come in, we'll do anything as long as it's legal and moral to help you be independent and sufficient and self-sufficient. We'll bend over backwards. We'll help you in any possible way we can, and we've done that in a lot of cases. The next 3 pages there say program guidelines. This is something that I've just started including with the training, but I wanted you to see it for 2 reasons. One is that we at Family Promise want you to know that this program is very structured. It's not a loosey-goosey program. Families don't sit around, eat bonbons at the day center while we watch TV. They are working hard, and they have a lot of things that they have to agree to in order to be in the program. We do a lot to help them, but they have to do their part because we're empowering them, and they have a lot to do, a lot of responsibility, and there's a lot of structure. So I want you to know as a volunteer that they're working hard and doing their part. If they're in the program, they are in need, and you can bet on that. But they're also been screened, and you as a volunteer and your children and the rest of your church members are safe. And so I want you to know that. They do go through a screening process. Let me just speak a little bit about that screening process. They go through a phone screening first, and then if they look appropriate, then our caseworker will have a face-to-face interview with them that's normally about an hour. They have to fill out a lot of different paperwork. We're trying to screen out through this process several things. Current substance abuse, we want to screen out. Any acute mental illness, we want to screen out. Serious domestic violence, that's almost an oxymoron. All domestic violence is serious, but the kind in which puts the family in danger. If it's current and the family's in danger, we cannot take them because we cannot protect families from domestic violence because our churches are open. It's easy to find out where they're staying and to have access. We're also looking at things like their financial situation. We pull a credit check so we can see how many evictions, foreclosures, how much debt are we dealing with, how easy is it going to be to find housing. We also do a criminal background check. We're looking for two things there. We're looking for sticky fingers and we're looking for balled up fists. So we're looking for anybody that has a tendency for violence because we want you to be safe, but we also want your things to be safe so that things don't walk out of the church during the week. So those are the two things that we're really looking at the criminal background check. We also look at things like attitude and motivation. We want families that are going to work well in this situation. We're also looking at families that can turn around their situation 90 days or less, or at least get ready to go on to another program like a transitional housing program here in our community. So we give you this so you know their structure, but also as a volunteer you need to know kind of what the guidelines are. So when you host, these will be in the host book, and we'll talk about that in a minute. They'll also be posted somewhere at your church, so you'll see these. Your job as a volunteer is to not to be the police, but to be the reporter. So, and I'll show you in a minute where you're going to be reporting that, but you'll report that in the host book so that I can know it and can follow up and hold the families accountable. You're never to discipline a family. You're just to report to us what's happening if a rule is being broke or a guideline, and then we take it from there. The next sheet, I think, says this, host coordinator comments. Okay, this is where you report to me. This is a very important piece of paper, even though it's just a bunch of lines and primarily blank. The only way that I know what's happening at the church tonight over on Pleasant Hill is the coordinator could call me, but I don't normally get calls every single day from coordinators. It's much easier for whoever's volunteering to just find a sheet of paper and write what happened during their shift. If you got 3 different shifts at night, somebody brings the food and eats, somebody comes and fellowships, and then somebody stays overnight. The easiest thing is for you as a volunteer after your shift or when you're leaving or the shift changes just to write on this. This is what happened tonight. It doesn't have to be super detailed, but most of the time it says things like, oh, we had a great night, we played Monopoly, and or the kids played well together, and we had a great meal, and we ate this or that, or things like that. Everybody got along well, and everybody was in bed by 9, or whatever, things like that. But it's also a place where if there are any issues, family 2 was an hour late coming in, or little Johnny has a toothache, I think he needs a dentist, or something like that, that needs to go on here so that I can deal with and respond to those things. Because what happens is the van driver brings the host book. The host book is a white notebook about 1 inch thick. We call it the Family Promise Bible because it has everything in there you need to know about Family Promise. And so whenever the families are at your congregation, the host book is here. So when the van driver brings the families, he brings the host book and walks it in and hands it to whoever the volunteer is there. So you've got the host book, emergency contact numbers, more information you could ever want to know, how to contact people, what to do in case of emergency, all of that. Information on the families, all of that stuff. And this is in there as well. So find this, it's under the host comments section, flip to there, it'll have the day on there, and you just put your comments on there. Any questions about that? Okay. If a day or